Yeah, that should be fine then. Yeah. So again, I'm really, really appreciative that you're doing this.
Yeah,
Um,
no problem.
yeah. The reason why I wanted to do this, honestly, is because I felt like we're on the same wavelength for a very long time. So
Interesting.
you seemed like an interesting person to talk to because, I've always been into this monochromatic depiction of literature type art, and
Mm.
I've never really connected with somebody else on their interest. And I think I first came across your work. It was a really while back. I think it was an Instagram video before Reels were a thing,
Hmm.
and it might have been Dante or Paradise Lost or something like that. It
Yeah.
was a lot of like black and white, like etching style inks.
Hmm.
Um, and then I kind of followed you a little bit, and it became very obvious that you're a bit of an erudite. You're reading a lot. You have an interesting classic literature, and I'm kind of curious where's that where does that come from? Where did that interest develop? Because that's not light reading for people these days, and not a lot of people are reading this material. I have, but I've never really connected with somebody who has too. So I'm curious where did your love of reading and literature start?
Oh man, yeah, that goes way back. Well, first off, I'm glad to hear that you found a connection there with our stuff. In this day and age, it's definitely not a given. So, it's definitely nice to hear. And yeah, on that you were connecting with that kind of work. I did. This is really the first time we're meeting. We've just barely exchanged a few emails, but I did a quick skim through your YouTube channel, and I saw that you're doing monochromatic work, at least for your graphic novel stuff that you shared on your YouTube, which is really cool to see, by the way. It looks like you're working really hard, and you're really putting the stuff out there and making the damn thing, which is important and something that I
Which I
always.
finished the damn thing, by the way, finally.
Yeah, I read that you put out a self-published, like you finished one. You got a
Well, I
graphic
haven't.
novel out there.
It's been shopped around. It's been pitched. Having a full time job. This has been like a 6 year project of. I'm depicting it's historical. It's historic, not historical fiction. It's just history, really. Um, um, and I think during COVID, I took a screenwriting class, and I think the easiest way to put a screenplay together was to just depict a story you already know, just
Right.
put it into a structure.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like an easier task than coming up with something completely original. And I just wanted an excuse to use dip pens and fountain pens, and the first iteration was storyboards, but that kind of went nowhere quickly. So then I switched to a full-on graphic novel. But I appreciate
Nice.
that you checked that out.
Yeah. That's great. Stay on the path, keep doing it. Yeah, and that you're doing it along with having a full-time job, all the better. It's hard. I know it's hard, so I know you're putting in the work. As to my interest in literature and things like that, I don't really consider myself widely read. I like to read, but I wouldn't say that I'm erudite in any capacity or anything like that. I just feel like there's nothing but this tremendous list of great literature that I should be reading. So, but the interest that I do have, I think that it goes back to what my main drawing inspirations were. So pretty young, I was already interested in like the work of the Renaissance and things like that. I loved the old masters, and not just in like an impressed way. I loved the old masters, and I was like, I got to draw like them. Like it's not just like, oh, they're really cool, and that's like the history of art and all that. I was like, I want to draw like Michelangelo. So I started getting really interested, and part of that interest was naturally like, well, what inspired them, right? And a lot of work is biblical, of course. And I was raised in a Catholic family, so I felt like the Bible wasn't alien to me. I knew what that was. I knew what the stories were, but it isn't all biblical, right? They did also have other things that they made art on, and as certainly as you go into later artists, there is a lot of work that is based on things like Paradise Lost, Dante's Inferno. So that was my initial interest in sort of being aware of things like that, things like the Iliad, things like the Odyssey. And I would say that I became aware of it, but I didn't go read them, right? I didn't jump in and try to read them. And I think that what pushed me over the edge, and I think that this is the case for a lot of people, is that a piece of pop art, like contemporary art, made me reassess how into that stuff I was. So for me, it was a metal album called Paradise Lost by a band called Symphony X. And I listened to that album when I was probably like, I must have heard it when I was like 14 or 15 years old, and I loved it. I would just loop it over and over again while I was drawing. You know, some of my favorite like drawing music.
Yeah.
You know, I like drawing monsters and high energy stuff and things like that. So just aligned. And I thought the lyrics were super cool. I loved all the songs. And then I found out that, it took a while for me to be like, well, it's called Paradise Lost. It probably is based on that thing that I'm vaguely aware of. I then did a little research, found out it was definitively a concept album. And then I found out that some of the lyrics were straight from the poem. And I was like, I got to read this thing, you know? So then that was really what made me look for a copy. I happened to have one. My parents had like in our bookshelf, they had gotten like, someone comes by door to door and they'll sell you like, you should have all the classics. You know, I've got them right here. Buy them all in one go for $100 right now. So they had that kind of like a classics collection, and Paradise Lost was in there. So I went and grabbed that off the shelf. It had just been sitting in my house the whole time. It was way above my reading level at that point, but I sort of skimmed it and looked through all the pages, and I was like, I couldn't understand what was happening, but sentence to sentence, I was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. Like, this is crazy. And that, I would say that was my first real introduction to like, maybe you should read them. Maybe you should actually like go and read them.
Yeah.
So I did that. You know, I also, Dante's Inferno was also in that collection.
Were they the Gustave Doré's illustrated versions, or?
This is so long ago that my memory is hazy on that. Like, those books disappeared in a move, like we got rid of them. So I don't, it's not like they were fancy books. They were made to look fancy, but they were cheap. So I don't really, it's been so long since I've seen them that they might've had reproductions of the Doré prints just like printed in there, but I really don't remember.
I have a hard time looking at Doré because I'm just so impressionable that immediately I start to steal stuff from Doré that I have to like consciously put that away. Is like, just because I'm fascinated, especially like I'm fascinated with how like the story of Franklin Booth, assuming that a lot of the etching stuff was in pen and ink and trying to just mimic that.
Yes.
And I think I did not know etching was a thing either. So I was like, used to look at this stuff and just go, how is this even a thing? And just grabbing tools and grabbing X-Acto knives to regular paper, trying to like scratch white out of it. I was like, this is not happening. This is bad.
Yeah.
But that's cool. So were you, so it wasn't a religious interest then that, or was it, that kind of made you gravitate towards this kind of work?
No, at that point, it wasn't anything religious. I mean, I was, like I said, I was raised in a Catholic family, but it wasn't, I guess that was just sort of the soup I was swimming in. Like, it wasn't like, it didn't stand out to me that Paradise Lost was about Jesus and the devil and Adam and Eve. I was like, yeah, lots of stuff is like, it was just, that part of it was unremarkable to me at the time. And it's become more interesting since then. But at the time, that aspect of it was unremarkable. It was the language that I was attracted to. It was the power of the language.
That does, and that seems like a constant theme through, especially your video essays and your work. You seem to enjoy poetry, language. You appreciate the art of. Would you say you're more of a visual or a literal thinker? I understand that might be a false dichotomy I'm presenting you, but like, are you more words in your brain, or?
Well, I Well, first off, I would agree that the dichotomy is probably false, right? I think that there's some sort of like, I'm not sure that we know what the primordial stream of thoughts really is. Um, I I feel it feels like it makes sense to me that that would be something unknown, and then at a second step, it sort of gets filtered by the brain as like, all right, well, this one's an image, this one's a word, this one's an image, this one's a word. Um, I have it's an interesting question to try to parse out in like, all right, well, are you a word person or an image person in terms of art or your life? You know, because the image, the answers are kind of different there. So one of the I've tried to spend a good amount of time analyzing how I think, like looking at moment to moment what the nature of my thinking is. And my my inner life is usually like a movie. It's like if I'm imagining something I'm worried about or something I'm looking forward to, it is a sequence of events playing out in my head, like, and I can see people's faces and lighting and a scenario and all of this. And but part of that is I'm also imagining the talking. So I'm like imagining the words spilling out of my mouth, their mouth, like I'm kind of playing out the whole scene in my head. So I think it's kind of both in that regard.
Yeah. And I find that I have to consciously put myself in a, when paper and pen is at hand, the visual stuff comes pouring. However, like when I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about, it's usually just a stream of consciousness words. But in other times, like when I'm reading, I have explosions of images pop up, and
Yeah.
you know, I usually have I prefer cheaper versions of my favorite novels because I start to illustrate them in the book because I just want to see, I want to see that stuff pop up. So walk me through your journey, because like I obviously went back to your stuff, the Paradise Lost stuff, and then there was kind of like a gap where I'm not sure what was happening. I think that you were transitioning between work for hire or freelance, and then you kind of popped back up on YouTube, more more from a like a coaching and a teaching perspective. Am I right in assuming that?
Yeah.
So so do you dabbled a little bit after Art Center in the industry and then decided not for me, or how did that work?
Yeah. Well, it was, you know, it was a 11-year long dabble. Pretty long dabble. But I think well, first off, I should say I don't think of myself as being out of the industry, right? My interests have gone in this other direction, and I'm doing coaching, teaching, that kind of thing, and it can support me now, right? But life is chaos. You never know what's going to happen. You know, that could stop working, or I could change on the inside. You know, I could find that I have something could just change. I could want different things or things like that. And the way that things change might be I go back to the industry, right? Which is, you know, actually, in my opinion, a lot of little tiny industries that are all kind of masquerading as one thing. So I don't really consider myself out of it. It's like, it may look like that now just because I haven't gone back yet, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really know where that's going to go. But the basics of my art is so I went to Art Center College of Design in California. I started working in a theme park design company right at the end of my time there. They kind of overlapped for a bit. And then I worked there for a little over 3 years. I left school behind at that point because I just wanted to make money, and I didn't want to, you know, pay money going back to when I already had a job. Yeah. So I worked there for a little over 3 years, which was really like great exposure to, well, you know, it's like, you call it a theme park design firm, but it's like any firm that does that kind of stuff is really doing all kinds of things. There were times we were designing video games. There were times where we were making museum exhibits. We were making stuff that was never going to be real, stuff that was going to
And
be
were
real.
you enjoying that type of work, or was it just, hey, a job and I'm trying to support myself and I get
No,
to draw?
no, I liked it. I liked it for most of the time that I was there. By the and when I left, so I left because my then girlfriend, now wife, um, she we were both from New York, but she was living with me in California at the time. Um, she got a job back in New York. That's where I am now. That's where I'm from. And you know, we were committed to our relationship. So she was like, I got to take this job. And I was like, I understand you need to take this job, because it was like in the move in the direction she wanted to go. And I just kind of assessed the situation. I was like, you know, fuck it, you know, just go take the job and I'll catch up with you in like 6 months. Right.
Oh,
So
okay.
I made that commitment. If she hadn't gone, if I didn't have that relationship, I don't know when I would have left. I probably would have stuck with the company. And I have freelanced with them in the years since, right? But yeah, I just had a life thing come up that made me leave. There was, near the end there, it was easier to make that choice because, and this is classic, anyone who's worked in the industries knows, like some business development stuff started coming up that started messing with the schedules on everything. And I was like, if I was going to get out, now would be a good time. Like what I had earlier on there, I'd had some good balance and it was easier to manage my time. And as things progressed, the balance started slipping. You know, the time management started getting, it was not ideal. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
I'm like one of those maybe voices that I don't think gets heard a lot, where I have tried so desperately to get a job in the industry from a position of need so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the not getting it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I think slowly started to hear a lot of stories. I think it all kind of crystallized for me in the first Lightbox Expo. I was there and I was like, yeah, I don't know if this is my scene anymore.
Interesting.
Or, yeah, I was like, why? And a lot of, it used to piss me off when people say, I know you like to draw, but if that turns into your job, you might actually not enjoy it as much.
Yeah.
But I had no metric of knowing whether I'm going to enjoy drawing projects for someone else or not. Um, but I think, you know, I've been hired by a few kind of producers to just do some character designs and stuff, and I've noticed every time I don't put my best work. I don't know how to find the passion. Honestly, I'm
Right.
pretty kind of self-motivated and a bit selfish that way. It's like I just want to do. I can summon the passion when I know this is my thing.
Yes.
And if it's not, maybe it's a work ethic thing, but I'm kind of glad that never happened. I
Yeah.
think
No,
I also
I
wanted
don't
it.
think it's a work ethic thing. I don't think it's
Oh,
a work ethic thing.
well, and I also I think I was craving a job in the industry from a self improvement point of view,
Mm-hmm.
where I thought if I was forced to do something on a daily basis for 8 hours a day, that's just a way for me to improve my own skills. The
Right.
heck with the project. Like that's what how I was thinking.
Right.
But I had to kind of,
I thought that way too for a long time. I get
and
that.
that doesn't, and you didn't find that that was so?
It was, but I had to fight for it. And I'm a pretty stubborn guy, so I was able to fight for it. But just for a lot of people, they're just not willing to go through that, you know. So it's not going to work for most people. Like when I was working at that firm, um, photography use, heavy photography use, like a lot of photobashing started sweeping through in the middle
Yeah.
of it. And I was one of the people who was just like, you know, I would do some of it, but I was at a certain point, I was like, I'm not going to do it for more than a particular amount of time. And that's easy to get fired over, right? But
Yeah.
I'm so stubborn that I was just like, let me show you how fucking good I can do it by hand. And I just did it. I did it enough and it required changing. Like I had to find ways to wiggle that in. I was like, well, you can't photobash in front of the client in a meeting, but I can draw in front of the client in a meeting. So I like wiggled my way in where I was like the only one of the few people they wanted like in a room drawing in front of the client.
Yeah.
And then that made me like, okay, well, Steve doesn't have to photobash. Like you just let him draw.
It kind of, I mean, that's why I really love Ian McCaig still handing in pencil samples in this day and age. And like, people just want his work so much that they don't give a shit. They're like, fine, it's Ian McCaig.
It's a good situation to put yourself in if you can, but it's a mix of good luck, and it's not fun doing that. Like, you have to really be stubborn to do that, and people resist, and it puts you in uncomfortable situations. So it's just not for everybody.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful in retrospect right now, even though I felt like it was a burden for a long time, that I actually have a source of income that's not art related.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have to do anything. And I do feel like it was a handicap at first because my development as an artist was so slow. Because I was in this little bubble and I really had no measure of how good or bad I was getting. It's a very dangerous thing when you're the only artist around and you're impressing everybody, but you know what the quality is when you're sitting with real artists and you're like, I was delusional for a bit. Like, there was a point where I was like, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, I'm really good. And then you go to a convention or so and get feedback, and you'd be crushed for a month. And you're like, you know what? Maybe I should take a class or two. And also, there was when I was younger, there was some arrogance, pride about learning by yourself. I don't know where that came from. Where you're like, no, it's only real if I figured it out myself. I'm trying to reinvent the wheel that way.
Yeah.
And I think I had some reality slaps until I started to subscribe to some stuff, and when I did that, I was like, holy shit, I don't know anything. I have no idea, especially like after the monochromatic stuff. I mean, I used to just be a pencil and pen and ink artist, and it was mostly graphic novel was my gateway drug to, and comics was my kind of my first love with art. But then I didn't really start drawing seriously. So I moved to the States when I was like 21 to come to college. And I think that's when I finally figured out, after like having some inclination towards art, but not having any prospects of it or concept of it as a career or something that you could do. And I had a friend that worked at a comic book shop when I was at college. And I think it's only then when I saw the credits, I was like, oh my, somebody's drawing this shit.
Yeah. I had a similar moment.
Yeah, it blew my mind that like, this is being produced by someone. There's their name right there.
Yeah.
And then
the weird thing with art is that you just kind of assume it's just there. Like it just comes out of the ether, you don't, unless you have a moment like that, you don't really put it all together, that it's a thing people make, and that it's like part of their lives and all that.
Yeah. And at 21, that's when I really thought like, maybe I should try to do this. And it started with tracing a lot of comic books and just trying to learn to to coordinate my eyes and hands and stuff. And that kind of started to snowball, even though I think compared to a lot, maybe that was a late start. But I don't know where I was going with this. It just, we derailed so much. So in terms of identity, I mean, I'm a mental health therapist as well. And I see a lot of people, I work at a university, and one of the things that strikes me the most, that's been affecting a lot of like college age students the most, is there's a sense that their self-esteem and worth is tied to something that fluctuates. It's an external variable that they cannot control. Their academic performance, for example, or their athletic abilities. Right. And I don't, sometimes I wonder, self-worth by itself likes to tie itself to stuff. But you really need to be very conscious and figure out how to tie it and where to tie it to, something a little bit more steady. Do you find that there's I'm assuming that is a big danger with artists because it's a skill, it's a valuable skill, and as a person going through college and having that talent, you could tie your identity a lot to your artistic abilities. Um, and anecdotally, just hearing a lot of podcasts and hearing a lot of, uh, with the explosion of YouTube, I'm seeing a lot of just artists just in agony and anxiety. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell's this? Why? Um, have you encountered that a lot, or in terms of with you for yourself? Like, where would you place your art and identity? In terms of a hierarchy of identity, if you were to place it somewhere, where would that go?
Yeah. All right. Well, I love doing I love talking on other people's channels because it's like a little opportunity to just I can just sort of be as far out there as I actually feel about these things. You know, all this info, all of my feelings about stuff is on my channel, but I try not to repeat it over and over again just because it can get kind of a little too much.
Yeah.
But you know, and since you wanted to, you know, you'd mentioned when you reached out, like the way people's philosophies and intersects with their art and all of that. Yeah, I obviously teaching a lot of students, I see that all the time. I've been through it. I think that it's almost inevitable that if you do art for a long time, you're going to tie it into your self-esteem. It and I think it's worse than a lot of other things because art is so, for a lot of people, explicitly personal, right? Like a lot of the ideas that we have around art are that it's one of the definitions people will try to give for art. It's like art is self-expression. So it's like if you express something that you think is shitty, that's ostensibly yourself, right? So it's like it's really close to being tied up with your identity, and our culture reinforces that. I think not just the artistic culture, but the general culture at large.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good idea.
I
I don't
I don't
think.
either. That's why I was wondering
Yeah,
how you thought about that. Yeah.
yeah. I think it doesn't. Well, I think it's a bad idea, right? Now that doesn't help much because you can tell an artist like that's a bad idea as much as you want, right? But if there's no alternative, there's not really much to be done with that information, right?
Mhm.
It's like, okay, it's a bad idea. Well, what am I supposed to change? You know, so I usually advise people to internalize their goals as much as possible. So get it out of the externals. Like it's a weird counterintuitive thing, but you've got to stop caring what's on the paper at a certain point, right? And that may be medicinal if the problem's really bad, right? It might just be a temporary 1 to 5 years of not caring what's on the paper so that you can fix what has, for a lot of people, become a totally toxic, vicious cycle that they cannot break out of, right? They're just disappointing themselves with their output over and over and over again. And every disappointment is they're just pinning that to their soul, right? And they're like, that means I'm fucked up, I'm failing somehow, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's an extreme situation to be in. So yeah, the medicine for that might be sort of hypnotizing yourself a bit into like, I don't care what's on the paper. It doesn't fucking matter. It means nothing. It has nothing to do with me. And the people who have been able to do that a little bit that I've interacted with, they've gotten a lot of benefit from that. It's not easy, but like I said, if you internalize stuff, if you instead make your goals less goals, almost like a checklist of the things you're looking out for while you work. It's like, if that checklist is instead of, do I have good anatomy? Do I have good perspective? Do I have good color? Like,
Yeah.
phrases that I have a lot of problems with those too, right? But if instead your checklist looks like, am I happy right now? Am I relaxed right now? Am I peaceful right now? Am I doing what I think I should be doing right now? Right? Like those things, if you can really make it so that those feel like those are your goals, like those are the checks you're trying to put down, that's sustainable. That can sort of fix your heart a bit, right? And the to correct for them when they're not around, right? Like if you're like, all right, I'm not peaceful right now. What am I? I'm furious. It's like, all right, I should stop being furious. It's like you'd want to fix that anyway. It's not weird to want to get rid of like the anger that, weirdly enough, a lot of people are sitting around drawing in.
Yeah.
And I just think that, and it can take a while to get used to that, but I think that that's just a much better way to operate for most artists. And again, you can just do that for a while, probably a long while. If it's relevant to you, it's probably because you're in pain, right? Do it for a long while, and then you can bring the other stuff in later, a year from now, 5 years from now. You know, you can start bringing back those other check boxes.
Yeah, I was tabling at a Comic-Con once, and I had a lot of I had a couple of people ask me advice about expanding their social media presence. And I told them, look, I don't have a big social media following. And honestly, it's been my saving grace.
Right.
Knowing that you're doing work for yourself and not a lot of people are watching was an antidote to being relaxed while doing it. I've always been fascinated too by J.D. Salinger, who just wrote one book and then apparently wrote a bunch of shit in his shed that he didn't want to share with anybody. He was like, I've done my thing and I'm just going to sit here and write for me. Publish it. Yeah. And that's just amazing to me. That just, you know, it's the highest expression of I'm doing it for the joy and love of it. And I'm doing this because I enjoy doing it. And I'm not reducing what I'm doing as a means to an end. The thing should be the end itself. But I understand the trap of I have a bunch of followers. I have a YouTube channel. I need to compete with other artists that are pumping out material all the time, and the level of self-criticism. You know, the reflection. I've always told people like I'm a human being type guy. I'm not a human doing type person.
Right.
Like, be a being first, and you know, put artist second if you need to, or third or fourth. But it shouldn't be where your time. I think, honestly, it doesn't even have to be a real answer. It can be a useful lie. And I think religious people figured out where to put their self-esteem. I mean, in a soul, whether you believe it or not, you can't fuck with a soul. That's not a movable thing. It doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't change. It doesn't take your self-esteem up and down with it. It's something steady, consistent, always going to be there. I don't know if you're not spiritual. I mean, I'm pretty spiritual. I'm not religious, but like you could take it. I mean, you could say your consciousness, or you could just have a better relationship with your brain, I guess. All right. So I realize that I'm running out of time a little bit.
We got a little bit. We're all right. We're all right.
Yeah, I think I'm oh shit. Yeah, I have that like old crappy Zoom where it's giving me a 5-minute warning. So yeah, well.
Oh, we should have done it on mine. I have a paid account.
Oh fuck. Well, maybe we'll have a part 2 one day if you're up for it. So for the work you're doing now, is it mostly are you working on anything right now, or are you just mostly teaching?
Yeah, what I do day to day right now is mostly I have a course out that I'm doing online. It's called Form from Imagination. And that course has a large feedback component. So at this point, that's most of my day to day is staying on top of the feedback for the assignments in the course.
Oh, that seems like a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. It's a lot. I've done hundreds of feedbacks in the past year. It's a lot, but yeah, so that makes up a lot of my day to day. I'm also doing a lot of AI advocacy around some of the emerging AI art systems. That takes up a surprising amount of time because
now, has that been annoying, Steve? Or like, because I know you found yourself to be the spokesperson for that kind of stuff, and probably because you were, you know, the most articulate maybe, but have you found that to be, I know it's good stuff and I know it's important stuff to do, but has that felt like a burden for you, or are you kind of glad that you're in the forefront of this fight?
Um, you know, my feelings are complicated, I would say. I mean, it's it's like it feels like I'm obviously it feels like I'm doing the right thing, right? Like I really care, right? Like it's a good thing that I'm doing. It's just it is such a bummer for me that it's all going on, that it is very difficult for me personally to interact with it with like a high level of energy, right? Like I find it to be spiritually draining at some level. Not the work that I need to do, really, not like the research that I need to do or giving the talks or anything like that. But it's just like the whole sector, you know, the fact that it's happening, that things are rising, the pushback. Yeah, you know, it you know, I do realize that, yeah, I'm some a light spokesperson kind of a thing, but there's fortunately, thank God, there's a lot of us now. You know, there's a lot of people speaking out. You know, I'm working with a bunch of people who really care a lot the way that I do, but it doesn't, you know, when you say the word spokesperson, it's like that has a positive charge, and it's like it's hard for me to find the positive charge on it, right? Like I want the battle to be over
Yeah.
now, tonight. Like I want us to have won and have it be done immediately. You know,
Yeah.
like I want it to be over.
Yeah.
So my feelings are complicated, I would
Yeah,
say.
it seems like it's going to be a long thing, though, unfortunately. But I mean,
Yeah.
you can dip out whenever you need to. But I know you won't. You've mentioned earlier how stubborn you were with
Yeah.
things.
No, when something else comes up, I'm always like, "Ah, I gotta do it." I'm like, yeah, I'm in. Yeah,
All right,
always.
Stephen. Like I'm actually maxing out of my Zoom shit right now. So,
All
but
right.
you know, I really, really appreciate your time.
No
Um,
problem.
I think I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna try to reach out to Carla Ortiz because I really want to learn more about what she's been doing.
Yeah,
Um,
she's doing great stuff in the AI advocacy for sure.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks a lot. This has been fun. If you're ever up for it, I know I still have a lot to talk to you about. You've been a great conversation. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks a lot for your time, man.
Sounds good. All right.
Appreciate it. I
Thank you
should
so
put this
much.
up tomorrow or something, but
Yeah, yeah, throw
yeah,
it up there fast. Yeah.
yeah. Thank
And
you.
yeah, thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me. And keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.